Many of you are probably familiar with the 5 elements of emotional intelligence. We're going to do a quick overview, but we're going to do it through the lens of leadership. So I invite you to think of either yourself as a leader, as I quickly talk about these 5 elements, or consider another leader you have or have to interact with or in the past or present to evaluate at the level to which this element was present. So you can think about yourself as a leader and kind of evaluate, or you can think about a leader you've interacted with in the past or present and maybe evaluate that in your mind. So the first element of emotional intelligence, and these are in no particular order, is self-awareness, right? A self-aware leader is not only cognizant of their strengths and weaknesses, but they're able to actually own them, right? They own when they make a mistake. They're honest. They tell their team when they mess up, right? They're also humble enough to summon the strengths of their team to fill their own gaps. They kind of know what they're good at and know who they need to call on when they need support. The next aspect is self-regulation. So leaders who are able to self-regulate their emotions rarely fly off the handle. They don't attack others or exhibit extreme emotional reactions. They don't also rush into decisions, and they're able to remain in control of their emotions even during challenging times. So I'm sure all of us can think of a leader that hasn't had self-regulation as a strength, but we might have one that actually has. So again, be thinking about yourself or another leader as I'm going through these. Next is motivation. Leaders that are motivated have a high standard for the quality of their work, and they're connected to a sense of purpose, of why they're doing what they're doing. And this is infectious. It's something that they wear on their sleeve, right? They're able to anchor to this sense of purpose when needed and inspire others with that purpose as well. Now, sometimes, and this was sort of one of the other common misconceptions that I came across, is we kind of bundle it all up into empathy, but empathy is just part of it. Leaders with empathy are able to put themselves in someone else's shoes. They're really committed to developing other people. They speak out against injustice, bureaucracy. They're skilled at listening and giving critical feedback. And one thing that's super important is to point out the difference between empathy and sympathy. So according to our friend Merriam-Webster, sympathy is the feeling that you care about and are sorry about someone else's trouble, grief, or misfortune. When we sympathize, we're trying to understand from our perspective. Empathy is defined as the feeling that you understand and share another person's experience and emotions, right? Or the ability to do that, right? This means you actually make an intentional effort to try and understand, why does that person feel the way they do? Why did they do what they did, right? It takes enormous patience and listening, and also the ability to suspend judgment, which is hard for a lot of people, right? And last is social skills. Leaders who possess social skills are great communicators. They know how to frame both positive and challenging news, and they don't avoid the challenging news, right? They're able to kind of read the room and know how to deliver it. They're able to communicate powerfully through change initiatives, and they understand that timing and socializing new ideas in groups is critical to getting buy-in or support. So what do I mean by that? I was recently leading a global dispersed team of coaches, right? 12 coaches. And I can't just tell one coach something or 3 coaches something here. When I'm introducing something new, change, a big initiative, I have to do that all together, right? If you tell people in groups or in one-on-one, you start to create factions, you start to have people not understand, why are we doing this? So you really want to make sure as a leader that you're using that social skill of understanding timing when you are trying to lead change, make large announcements, so that you're not having sort of groupthink, factions forming, people making assumptions and not being able to answer their questions in a group setting. If you thought about sort of the leader, maybe it was yourself, maybe it was a leader that you were thinking about, which one of the elements of emotional intelligence was the leader you were thinking about during my little conversation about emotional intelligence? Which one of these did the leader really succeed at, right? Whether it's you or somebody else, which one was that leader that you were thinking about strongest in? And the reason why I wanted you to think of a specific leader is so that you could really experience some of the impact in your recollection of that person, right? That person clearly impacted you by exuding empathy, by leveraging their social skills, by showing that they possessed self-awareness. Well, why do leaders need this? Okay, well, we're going to go to my probably most overused quote, but it's one of my favorite quotes from Gallup. Well, it's a piece from Gallup's research, and I'm going to ask you to guess our friends at Gallup are great at putting out compelling narratives about the state of the global workplace. They do state of the American workplace, state of the global workplace. Regularly, they publish these reports. And in their research each year, they inform people, strategy leaders, and those that develop talent with a blueprint of what to do and what not to do. Managers account for what percentage of the variance in employee engagement scores? No Googling. Managers account for at least 70% of the variance in employee engagement scores. And if you drill down into this, it's the quality of the leader that matters, right? The quality of the leader that plays that role in those engagement scores. And if we look at this even more, specifically around leadership and practices and what makes great leaders, one of my favorite pieces of work is the research done by Kouzes and Posner, which is in their 6th edition. I highly recommend it if you haven't dove into it. It's also great to read some of the updates. Kouzes and Posner, they actually studied what made leaders effective and the organizations that they served across industry, culture, and they found that there were 5 exemplary leadership practices that all of these organizations had in common, right? The leaders that were succeeding and creating, and not just succeeding, but creating engaged teams, creating teams that work together to create quality outputs, right? They had these 5 things in common. They were able to model the way to set a standard of treatment of others by how they communicate, how they approach situations, how they work towards goals. They were able to inspire a shared vision, right? To really strongly believe in what's possible for a team, and then being able to actually communicate and inspire others to get on board with that. They're also really great at challenging the process. They were not afraid of change, innovation. They don't ever say, well, that's the way we do things around here. They're open to challenging the status quo, and they'll call out the lack of fairness and efficiency. They also noticed that these leaders were able to enable others to act. They were able to empower them to actually do what they do best to get things done, right? And really creating a thriving team from a place of mutual respect. Lastly, leaders who encourage the heart, right, really created this sort of culture of recognition with their team. They would reward and recognize team members for their hard work, and they would do this in a very specific way. Now, these behaviors may at times reflect an evolved emotional intelligence, but it's not always that simple, which leads us to the question, and we're not going to answer this question. It just leads us to the question, why is emotional intelligence so hard to measure and develop, especially when it comes to leaders? So, for example, those who have a lower EQ aren't always self-aware enough to know that they need to develop here, right? It's a blind spot for them. And a person's lack of emotional intelligence is hard to fix, but it takes honest, intelligent effort over really long periods of time. The person has to be engaged in that effort, and the organization also has to put a construct around that effort. So it's not something that someone can take a course on and now be certified as emotionally intelligent, because it's a form of intelligence. So we're here today to consider the question, what does EQ actually look like at work when it comes to leadership, and why is it that final frontier? Why is it so important? We see the outcomes of emotionally intelligent leadership in terms of specific behaviors, but that's not always the same as actually having an elevated level of emotional intelligence.
Let us know in the comments which part of this video helped you the most, and be sure to grab your free guide that's linked in the description. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.